Hi, I'm Show-ei-mon. This time, we will shorten the sleeves of a jacket with 3 fake buttonholes on each side. The before and the after look like this. This jacket sleeve shortening video includes several methods I have adopted from my own experience. Experienced tailors may find some parts a little unfamiliar. Please watch those parts as a reference only. Note that this is a video explaining my own method. Now, let's get started. This is the jacket we will be working on. It is a jacket with a lot of hand sewing. This time, we will shorten this jacket's sleeves by 3 centimeters from the sleeve opening. We will also move the fake buttonholes. First, let's take notes of the current measurements. The opening is 8 centimeters. It is quite short. The sleeve buttonholes start at 3.5 centimeters. The measurement from the lower buttonhole to the upper buttonhole detail is also 3.5 centimeters. The sleeve width is 14.5 centimeters. Next, mark the shortening amount. 1 mark on the seam. And also at the opening. 1 mark each between the opening and the seam. Make marks in 4 places around the sleeve. Now we will start unsewing. Be careful not to lose the buttons. Remove the lining as well. Unsew the tacking stitches, too. Unsew the hand-sewn sleeve buttonholes as well. After removing the buttons, measure the length and position of the buttonholes. The marks will fade, so mark them again. Before cutting the fabric, take it apart up to this point. Do the same on the other side. Press out the crease with an iron. Leave the faux opening folded. Press it like this. Do the same on the opposite side. Measure the shortening length from the edge of the seam allowance and mark it. Now cut the sleeve. I want to decide the lining length by matching it to the outer fabric, so I will cut it later. After cutting the outer fabric, draw the lines for moving the faux opening. The outer fabric and lining are tacked together at the seam allowance, so remove this as well. Since we want to sew it back in the same position later, let's make marks so the position does not change. There are original notches as well, but they are often misaligned. I usually make a slightly larger cut so that I can distinguish it from the original notch. Do the same on the outer seam. This time, I will remove this sleek. Instead, I will apply fusible interfacing. If the garment will be stored for a long time, using interfacing that is not fused to the fabric has the advantage of preventing shrinkage wrinkles in the fabric. However, since it takes more work to move the position, the price has to increase accordingly. So not many alteration shops go that far. Fusible interfacing gives the ironed folds a firmer shape and a cleaner finish. So I think many places generally remove the sleek. I resewed the seam that was undone to remove the sleek along the original stitch line. For now, make a crease at the finishing position. Press it so the 4 marks you made connect naturally. This time, to make it easier to see, I will mark the folded position. Now I'll apply the fusible interfacing. It depends on the thickness of the outer fabric, but this time I will use medium weight fusible interfacing. Apply it on the hem side, at the point where the edge reaches about 1 cm above the finishing position. Avoid the seam while doing so. Once the interfacing is applied, press the finishing position firmly with the iron. Once the crease is made, draw the lines for moving the faux opening. Press the crease firmly. Press open the seam of the outer sleeve where the opening is. The undersleeve area at the hem looks a little tight. We will widen the opening later, so open it slightly for now. Mark it at the original sleeve width measurement. This will be the position of the faux opening crease. Mark both the undersleeve and the outer sleeve. Mark the starting position of the faux opening. Remember that the faux opening was 8 cm. Make a mark 5 mm in from the original seam at the start of the faux opening. Connect this mark and the sleeve opening width mark with a straight line. Connect it to the elbow curve with a natural line. The line should look like this. Draw an extended line to the point where about 5 mm of seam allowance remains at the opening start. And connect it to the original starting position of the faux opening. This prevents the starting position of the faux opening from becoming too shallow after it is moved. Now, we will mark the opposite seam for letting out the width. If the hem side width is just slightly short, it will sit neatly. Apply fusible interfacing to the folded position of the faux opening as well. Applying interfacing here allows you to make a clean crease. It also firms up the fabric, so the fabric is less likely to distort when the buttons are attached. Apply the interfacing over the faux opening area so that it covers the fake buttonhole section. Apply it to the side where the fold will be made. Do the same on the opposite side. I want to start sewing from the upper side, so on the opposite side, the mark will be on the interfaced side. Now let's start sewing. Unsew the original seam. Make a cut at the point where the opening stops. Cut the side where the original cut was made. Right here. Cut this all the way to just before the seam. It may feel a little scary, but cutting this far allows the seam allowance to open cleanly. This is not an area where force is applied, so as long as you do not cut any further, there is no problem. Widen at the other seam. Since it will be widened using only one side, make sure the line does not become too steep. So start from above the finished line. Sew the reinforcement bar tack. And do the same on the other side. Now let's shape the sleeve with the iron. Press the area where the width was enlarged. Now, we will make the faux opening. Open the seam allowance up to the cut and press it. Match the marks that determine the sleeve width. And press with an iron while pulling it taut lengthwise to make the crease straight. Check whether the fold is neat. Check visually that the line from the elbow is not distorted and that the opening section is straight. We can see that it connects naturally from the sleeve seam to the faux opening. The opening is deep enough, so it does not look strange when seen from the side. Ideally, the overlap at the sleeve end should line up perfectly, with neither the upper nor lower side sticking out. However, at this stage, I personally prefer the upper side to stick out by about 1 mm. If I make it perfectly even here, I feel uneasy that the lower side may start sticking out before it is finished. If it looks okay, sew it together as it is. I may have sewn a little too far here. I will unsew it a little, as it will become difficult to sew later. Do the same on the opposite side. Now the sleeve shape has been made like this. Now let's cut the lining. First, turn the sleeve inside out, and place it so the outer fabric and lining settle naturally. Press the original crease flat with the iron. This is the finished position of the outer fabric. Cut the lining so it is about 2 to 3 centimeters longer than the finished position of the outer fabric. As the sleeve may be lengthened in the future, you might want to leave enough amount of lining. The lining is not always made to exactly match the outer fabric. If the lining was originally short, cutting it by the shortening amount will make it impossible to let the length out later. Cutting the lining at the point that's 2 to 3 centimeters beyond the finished position of the outer fabric will allow it to be lengthened again in the future. This time, I will cut it 2 centimeters beyond the finished position of the outer fabric. Do the same on the other side. Continue sewing. Tack the hem and seam allowance together. But because the sleeve length has been shortened, the original seam allowance section is now gone. Since we need to secure seam allowance, this overlap will be smaller than it was originally. Considering the seam allowance on the lower side, the limit for the overlapping part is probably about 1.7 centimeters. Turn it right side out. And pull it out with a sewing awl. This amount seems right after all, considering the seam allowance on the lower side. Press the sewn area with the iron. The lower side was not machine stitched, it was done by hand sewing. We want to do it in the same way, so we'll shape it with an iron first. Hand sew this part. Do the same on the other side. Now sew back the part that was unsewn earlier. After shaping it, sew it up to this point. Do the same on the other side. Finish the sleeve end with hand blind stitching. Blind stitch the upper side first. If you pull the thread too tightly, the outer fabric will be pulled and become dented. Pull it lightly enough so that it does not show on the outside. Sew up to around this area. The finishing point doesn't have to be that precise, as it will go inside the lining. Blind stitch the lower side as well. Decide the position so it does not bulge out on the outside. Blind stitch while checking that the needle does not go through to the surface. At the end of the stitching, sew over it 2 or 3 times. It should look like this. Now tack the hem. I am sewing with white thread so that it is easier to see. I will blind stitch it to the outer fabric, but if you pick up too much fabric, it will show on the outside. So pick up only 2 or 3 threads of the weave. I want to leave plenty of ease, so I'll keep the thread quite loose. The stitch spacing can also be fairly wide. Once it is blind stitched, put your hand in from the sleeve opening and spread it inside. This is to check the looseness. It is best if you can spread your hand without feeling the tacking thread inside. Leave extra thread for ease, then tie it off. See that it is not showing on the outside. Do the same on the other side. Now let's sew the fake buttonhole details by hand. 1 centimeter from the edge. Mark 2 points. And make them into a line. 3.5 centimeters from the sleeve opening. Mark another one slightly apart. And connect them to draw a line. The distance between the upper and lower buttonhole details was 3.5 centimeters. The length was 2 centimeters. Make a line in the same way. And this line will be the end position of the buttonhole detail. Another buttonhole detail goes in the middle. It is 1.75 centimeters. Mark it in a grid like this. We will sew the buttonhole details by hand, along the horizontal lines. This time, they will be chain stitch buttonhole details. Originally, there were 4 chain stitch loops made with thicker thread over a 2 cm length. Unfortunately, I only have slightly thinner number 30 thread. So I will make 6 loops to give the buttonhole details more volume. Hook the thread once around the needle as it comes out to make a loop. Then pass through the loop and put the needle through the fabric. Repeat this process. To make the loops line up in a consistent shape, the distance where the needle comes out should be kept the same each time. Adjust and pull the thread to also make the loops the same size. I think some practice is necessary. Now sew the rest. The sleeve buttonhole details are also a point that craftspeople care about. Some craftspeople are particular about hand sewing their buttonhole details, and some shops use customized buttonhole machines. When I worked for a company, we used an embroidery machine. I am not especially particular about buttonhole details, so I use a buttonhole attachment. For genuine working sleeve buttons, I ask a buttonhole specialist to do them. This time, I am finishing them by hand to match the original finish. Do the same on the other side. Try to keep the left and right sides symmetrical. If the left and right match about this much, it would be enough. Now erase the chalk marks for the moment. Then, start attaching the buttons. It depends on the size of the buttons. But on a standard jacket, they are usually sewn at about 1.5 centimeters from the edge. A 20 centimeters bamboo ruler is just the right width, so place it vertically and draw a line. Again, I only have number 30 thread, so I will use 4 strands for sewing on the buttons to create the original volume. Apply wax to make the thread firm. Waxing the thread makes it firmer and smoother, and helps prevent tangling. I use Tailor's chalk made of wax, but an ordinary candle can also be used. After applying the wax, apply heat to let the wax soak into the thread. By the way, if melted wax soaks into the garment, it will become a stain that is difficult to remove. So be very careful when using wax chalk. The wax has made the thread firm, so even with 2 strands, it is now easier to thread the needle. Attach the button at the point where the drawn line and the buttonhole detail intersect. Attach the 3 buttons so they line up perfectly vertically. Always insert the needle perpendicular to the fabric. If you insert it at an angle, the thread will pull, and the button position will shift. The needle entry point should also be at the same intersection position for all 3 buttons. Here, even a few millimeters of shift will make them look misaligned. The only tip I can give here is to aim for the same position. I think the only way to get the feel for it is repeated practice on many garments. From this angle, you can see whether they are misaligned well. Sew them on one by one, checking as you go. The third one is slightly crooked. When I place the ruler against it, I can tell there is a gap at the third button. I will reattach it. It may not be necessary to redo it with a gap this small. But if leaving it just makes me uncomfortable, so I will redo it. This time, they are aligned. There is no gap either. It looks like this. Now attach the other side as well. I was once told that it finishes neater if you attach from the upper button. But I attach them without thinking too much about it. I think starting from either one is fine. I think this looks good. The left and right sides are also aligned nicely. Erase the chalk marks. Finally, sew on the lining. Check whether the lining width matches at this point. If it is just slightly large, I sometimes leave it for ease instead of taking it in. Luckily, it fits perfectly this time, so it looks like I don't need to take it in. By the way, the lining finishes neatly without sagging if it is slightly narrower than the outer fabric. Since it looks like we do not need to take it in, tack it as it is. Match the cuts made earlier and sew them together. Sew about 4 to 5 centimeters. Do the same on the outer seam. Blind stitch the lining at 2 centimeters above the finished position of the outer fabric. Mark the undersleeve, the faux opening, and 2 points in between. If it is too short, it will pull the outer fabric and make it look caught. If it is too long, it may bunch up inside and come out when the garment is worn. The lining must be blind stitched at just the right length. As for how to decide the lining length, hold the armhole and the sleeve opening, and pull firmly. Note the point where the lining reaches the marked position on the body, and blind stitch it at the point that's 2 millimeters longer. Please learn this by feel. Secure it with pins. Move on to the top sleeve. Adjust it little by little until it reaches the right length. Secure the top sleeve side with pins as well. Then, align it with the markings and stitch it carefully to avoid distortion. Either vertical blind stitching or slip stitching is fine. If you are not used to it, it is easier to pin the 4 corners. Or baste all the way around first. If you are adding ease, blind stitch about 5 millimeters inside from the folded edge. Blind stitch at even spacings. If you blind stitch with fine stitches about 2 millimeters apart, the finish will be clean. If you focus on keeping your hand movement in a steady rhythm, the spacing will naturally become even too. Your hands will get used to it as you sew, but it takes practice to sew quickly. Once skilled, blind stitching one sleeve would take only 5 minutes. Be careful not to blind stitch the outer fabric as well. for reinforcement, sew over the level difference at the opening 2 or 3 times. It should look like this. Do the same on the other side. Finish it with the iron. Press the blind stitched area from the inside. It is complete. Among various alterations, a suit jacket is at an intermediate level or higher in difficulty. There are many companies where only highly skilled workers handle jacket alterations. Even if the general process is the same, the parts people skip and the parts they are particular about can be completely different. As for me, I have added and removed quite a lot from the method I was first taught to suit my own preference. Well, that is also one of the interesting parts of doing this work. And it is exactly why this work has such depth. You keep studying until the day you die. That is all for this video. Thank you for watching until the end. Please give a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. This was Show-ei-mon.